everyone, and welcome into the very first episode of the Crimson Flame podcast. I'm Katie Windham, and I will be your host on this exciting new endeavor. I'm really excited to get this thing started. So, first of all, just kind of what is this? What is the Crimson Flame podcast? It'll be a podcast focused on women's sports at the University of Alabama. Alabama has a tradition of winning and is, most commonly known with football. But there's been some really impressive and important things that have gone on all across campus, especially in women's sports. You have national champions at softball, gymnastics, women's golf. You have individual national champions in things like tennis and cross country. So it's not just a football school, and I think anyone that has followed the school closely knows that. And so this is just going to be focused on women's sports at Alabama. I want to kind of give every team some attention at different times. We'll be going through the schedule and results for every team just to kind of keep people up to date. But also, I want to have on guests of current and former athletes at Alabama, coaches at these teams that can come on and share kind of what's going on with their program, keeping fans up to date. And yeah, so kind of the normal format is going to be we'll kind of have a welcome intro, and then I will go through the rundown of past results of that past week since I last recorded, of what's going on in women's sports, wins, losses, awards, things like that. Then we'll kind of have our main topic. Sometimes it'll be a guest, like I said, sometimes it'll be a current Alabama coach or athlete, sometimes it'll be former, sometimes it'll be fellow reporters, people that cover the team, super fans, things like that. Just people that are kind of affiliated with the programs and that will give some good insight into them, hopefully. And then we will kind of look ahead to the schedule for the upcoming week before we wrap things up. So that's kind of how it's normally going to go. This is just going to kind of be the intro episode. So this is the first episode, but I don't know if I'm going to call it episode one or not, because it's kind of just going to be our intro setting things up. So first of all, why the name Crimson Flame podcast? Last year, when Alabama was celebrating 50 years of women's athletics at the university and 50 years of Title IX, it was kind of like they called it the Writ Her Name campaign, which was from the fight song Writ Her Name in Crimson Flame. And so I kind of just am playing off that. It's part of the fight song. Um, there's so many legends of Alabama women's sports, and so I kind of want to feature those, and so that's kind of where the name came from. And why am I doing this? Like I said earlier, I think it's just important to highlight these stories, these athletes, these teams that may not get as much attention. And look, I get it. My main, beats that I spend a lot of the year doing are football and men's basketball, but I also cover softball and gymnastics, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I just think it's cool to cover these other teams, and there's lots of good stories that need to be told and attention that's brought to these things. And so and then I just also feel like I'm qualified to do it, and there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, obviously I'm a female. I grew up playing women's sports. I grew up watching them. I was never a great athlete myself. I'm never going to claim that. That's the reason why I'm in journalism and not playing the sports. I think a lot of times people think that sports journalists were probably good at sports, and it's normally, I'd say it's the opposite case, that most of us probably weren't great. I think there's the exception of TV analysts, because obviously most of the time they're athletes that played at the highest level and then now transitioned to the TV side. But in general, sports writers probably weren't, I don't want to speak for everyone, but probably weren't the best in the world. But I did grow up playing sports. I had two sisters that were much better at me than sports. And so I watched them a lot, would go to their games. Both my sisters played softball and had a lot of success doing that. And so I've just spent a lot of time watching sports. I grew up going to a lot of sports. Like I said, I have two sisters. I didn't have any brothers, but both my parents were Alabama graduates. And so we went to a ton of sporting events growing up, mainly football. But we would come up to a gymnastics meet every year, basketball games. When I got a little older, we'd go to softball, went to the Patrick Murphy softball camp when I was little. And so yeah, I attended a lot of games in person. The invention of the SEC network was perfect for me. That came around when I was in high school, I think in 2012, when Texas A&M and Missouri joined the league, and kind of when the SEC network was made, because then I could watch Alabama volleyball while I was doing my homework. Whatever was on, I wanted to watch it and keep up with it. And so just kind of from I can remember very well as a child watching Alabama gymnastics win the national championship on my iPad. I can remember when Alabama softball won the national championship in 2012, and that game got so delayed for the rain, and so it started late. And I can remember I was watching it upstairs while the rest of my family was downstairs. And so a lot of these key moments in my lifetime of Alabama women's sports history, I was definitely watching and tuned in with. And then when I was in college, I just kind of viewed it as, these these people right now are my peers. It's free to go to all these things as a student. Why would I not go? I love Alabama. I'm going to support them. And so I went to dozens of soccer games, women's basketball, volleyball, softball, gymnastics. Would even went to a women's golf tournament. Like I went to as much as possible. Now, could I get my friends to go with me? No, I could not most of the time. I could get my friends to go to football, maybe a gymnastics meet or two. I think I got friends to go to one or two softball games, but there's a pretty infamous picture of me. I think it was in 2017 after Alabama women's basketball beat Tennessee, and in Christy Curry's post-game interview inside Coleman Coliseum. I'm the only student in the student section behind her. So, I have supported these teams myself in the past, so I'm not asking, people to do something that I haven't done. And so I think it's, important. And then just from a professional standpoint, I've covered gymnastics in some capacity since 2019 when I was an undergrad at UA. So this upcoming season will be my eighth covering the program. So I got to cover when they won the SEC championship in 2021 in Huntsville. I've gotten to cover some incredible gymnasts like Luisa Blanco, who obviously went on to be an Olympian, and just did some incredible things for this program, winning individual SEC titles. Got to cover the coaching transition. And then softball I've covered since 2021, which my first year on the softball beat was when they went to the Women's College World Series, lost in the semifinals, but Montana threw the perfect game on her 21st birthday against the defending national champions, and that to this day is truly one of the coolest sporting events I've ever gotten to witness in person. And really, softball that season is a big reason why I stayed in sports journalism because that was the year I was in grad school and I was kind of figuring out what I was going to do with my life. And I was perfectly content with Super Regionals that year being my last sporting event I ever covered in person. And it was the SEC tournament that year was the first event I think on campus that got to go back to full capacity after COVID. And then, but we still kind of had like some COVID restrictions, so we would do the post game interviews on Zoom instead of in person. And on that Zoom, Patrick Murphy, the Alabama softball head coach, said I better get my butt to Oklahoma City. So I did. I got to go cover the Women's College World Series for the first time, which was awesome. Like I said, got to cover Montana for that perfect game. And it was just a really cool experience. And since then, I've got to do it two more times. So in the 5 years I've covered Alabama softball, they've been to the Women's College World Series three times, which is just an event I grew up watching. So it's always really cool to be there. I encourage anyone that's a softball fan, an Alabama fan, to make it out to Oklahoma City if you can, whenever Alabama plays out there, because it's just a really cool, well-run sporting event. Now you do have to deal with the thunder and rainstorms almost every year that cause delays, but that's just the weather out there and you can't control it. But it's something I would definitely recommend to people. And so I've covered Alabama softball for 5 seasons. And so professionally, I've covered these teams. Also have covered women's basketball in the past, covered them in, I think 2021, the year that they made the NCAA tournament with Jordan Lewis when she was on the team. Jasmine Walker. I covered Alabama volleyball some in college, so I've covered these teams professionally as well. And so I kind of have personal and professional connections to them. And I think it's hard for people to understand, but when you become a journalist, you have to be unbiased. And so it kind of is easier to flip that switch than people would think of switching from fan mode to journalism mode. But it just kind of is what it is. And so it's really cool that these teams I grew up cheering, and that's kind of where my love of sports came in, that I now get to cover them. And so I kind of want to cover them more on this podcast. And then just kind of I don't want to say my plea, my charge to people would be that if you consider yourself an Alabama fan, but you pretty much just watch football, I understand that's fine. A lot of people, you don't have time to dedicate to other sports, but that's the only thing you're interested in. But if you truly consider yourself an Alabama fan, I would encourage you to find at least one women's team this year to support, to keep up with, to see what's going on. Softball has a rich tradition. Gymnastics has a rich tradition. Women's basketball has been doing some good things the last couple of years with Christy Curry. Cross country is consistently one of the best teams in the country. Has people competing at the highest level. So volleyball is a very fast-paced sport. It's entertaining to watch. So kind of whatever your interests are, you can find that niche on campus. There's also Alabama swimming that's had some individual national champions. You look at women's tennis. They just recently had an alum win the U.S. Open doubles title, which is impressive. And so, kind of whatever your interest may be, there's probably something you can keep up with and support. And I'd encourage you to get to a game. Some of them, like soccer, are free, and then most others aren't too expensive, or you can find a cheaper option like a softball. You can go sit out in the brickyard, which is a cool experience in and of itself. So I would just encourage people, and hopefully through this podcast, you can kind of find some stories that are worth rooting for and some teams that you're willing to support. And so, yeah, that's just kind of why I'm doing this. Kind of my background with women's sports at Alabama and kind of what we're looking forward to coming up. And so, since this is the first one and just kind of a mini episode, I don't have just a week of games to catch you up on kind of the whole season. So, we'll kind of, for some of the teams, so we'll do kind of a broad overview of where people are so far. So, Alabama soccer is 5-1-1, coming off a huge result against number three Duke on the road, where they tied 1-1. Nadia Ramadan had the game tying goal in the final minute, which was really cool. A big result for the team, especially after they had a disappointing loss at UNC on the Thursday before. And then soccer will open SEC play this week on Thursday at home against South Carolina, and that game will be on the SEC network. So maybe if you've never watched an Alabama soccer game, this is your opportunity to tune in because it's just on regular cable. You don't even have to stream in Tuscaloosa or the surrounding area. Um, you can go support them in person. Sorry, I just had a little microphone issue. I hope my sound is still okay. And then they will also be back at the Alabama Soccer Stadium on Sunday at 1 p.m. Freshman goalkeeper Maddie Mungia was named the SEC Freshman of the Week, so that was a big honor for her, kind of with her performance against Duke. Alabama volleyball is 4-1 so far this season. They will play at Wake Forest tonight, this Wednesday, on the day that I'm recording and the day the podcast will release at 5 p.m. And then they will stay on the road and they will go play in the UNA Volleyball Classic this weekend. They'll play Western Carolina on Saturday at 1 p.m. and then the host team, North Alabama, on Sunday at 2 p.m. So those are kind of the two teams that have been going so far. But then also this weekend there will be cross country road race in Huntsville at 8:30 on Saturday in the Southern Showcase, and then women's tennis will be traveling to Furman this weekend. They'll play on Saturday and Sunday in the Debbie Southern Classic. So there's a lot already going on. We're just in September, but things will continue to ramp up, and it's an exciting time of year in Tuscaloosa. But that'll just about do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully we'll have some exciting things coming up that you'll be able to follow along. But that's been today's episode of the Crimson Flame podcast. Thank you for listening or watching wherever you get your podcast.